Hi, I'm Maya. I spent years thinking if I just worked harder, loved deeper, maybe one day they'd see me. Instead, they cut me off at their anniversary party for my sister's boyfriend. They erased me from the night, from the photos, even from their own stories. But the one thing they couldn't erase was who I really was. Ever wondered what happens when the family that tried to erase you has to answer to the truth you became? Before we dive in, what time are you listening, and where are you tuning in from? Drop a comment below. I read everyone. The scent of fresh rain lingered in the air as I sat by the window, the early spring breeze slipping through the slightly cracked pane. My hands moved carefully, smoothing out the edges of a crisp white card embossed with gold lettering. I had spent hours choosing it, a custom card, elegant and simple, something that felt like it mattered. The gift beside it was even more thoughtful, a delicate hand-painted clock with our family name etched across the bottom. A quiet hope stirred inside me as I wrapped it with careful precision. Maybe this year, maybe they'd finally see me. Maybe this year would be different. The rain had softened into a mist by the time I picked up the phone. I held it in my hand longer than necessary, watching the screen light up with my mother's contact. My thumb hovered over the call button, and for a split second, doubt crept in. But I pushed it aside. This was family. Surely they'd be glad I was thinking of them. The phone rang twice before my mother picked up. I pictured her sitting at the kitchen table, probably wiping her hands on a dish towel like she always did when distracted. "Hey, Mom," I said lightly, forcing the warmth into my voice. "I was thinking maybe I could come a couple of days early, help set up for the anniversary party." For a heartbeat, all I heard was the distant clinking of something in the background. Then a small, strained laugh. "Oh, Maya," she began, and something tightened at the back of my neck. Her voice carried the same tone she used when turning down a favor she didn't want to refuse outright. Before I could fill the silence with anything, another voice cut in low and unmistakably firm. "My father. It's better if you don't come this year," he said. No hesitation, no soft landing. My mouth opened, but nothing came out. I heard a chair scrape against the floor on their end. "It's complicated," he added, as if that explained anything. The words felt rehearsed, heavy, hollow. I swallowed back the thick knot forming in my throat. Complicated, how I asked, voice quieter than I intended. There was a pause. I could almost see them exchanging glances. "It's just, Lauren's bringing someone important. We don't want too much going on." My mother said, her voice rushing now like a faucet turned on too late to hide the leak. "Someone important, not me, never me." I pressed the back of my hand against the window pane, the glass cool against my skin. "Right," I said simply. Another pause. Then the line went dead. I stood there for a long moment, phone still pressed to my ear even after the call ended, as if willing them to call back to say it was a mistake, that they were excited to see me, that they wanted me there. But the phone stayed silent. The kitchen clock ticked on, each second louder than the last. I placed the phone down carefully, almost reverently, next to the gift and the card. I sat at the kitchen table staring at them. My vision blurred slightly, but I blinked it away. The house felt too big all of a sudden, every corner too empty, too quiet. I thought of the birthday when my cake arrived, with my name misspelled, and how they had laughed it off like it didn't matter. I remembered flipping through the old photo albums, seeing myself tucked awkwardly at the edges of every frame, or missing altogether. Still, year after year, I'd held on, kept showing up, kept believing maybe next time would be different. Maybe if I tried just a little harder, gave a little more. But now, sitting there with the rain blurring the world outside, I realized the truth that had been waiting for me all along. They had never even wanted me there. The gift, perfectly wrapped, sat between my hands. The card, filled with words they would never read, weighed heavier than any stone. I ran my fingers along the edge of the ribbon, the texture soft, but unyielding, just like the hope I'd stubbornly carried. The rain picked up again, tapping against the window in soft, uneven beats. Somewhere in the distance, a car door slammed and a dog barked. But inside this house, there was nothing but the hollow sound of acceptance settling into the room. Maybe it had been there all along, lurking under every polite smile, every empty thank you. Maybe I had just refused to see it. I leaned back in my chair, the wood creaking under me, and let out a slow breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The gift stayed where it was untouched, waiting like me, waiting for something that was never coming. And suddenly, I wasn't sure what hurt more, the rejection itself, or the fact that a part of me had known it was coming and had still hoped. Anyway, the rain had stopped sometime in the night, but the morning still clung to a grayness that seemed too heavy for spring. I sat in the kitchen, the same spot where I'd left the carefully wrapped gift days ago. My coffee mug sat empty at my elbow, forgotten. Outside, birds flitted from tree to tree. But inside, the silence felt thick, like it had absorbed all the noise I might have made if I still had the energy to speak. Without thinking much about it, I reached for my phone, the screen lighting up in my hand. No missed calls, no new messages, only the endless parade of updates I hadn't asked for. My thumb swiped lazily across the screen, muscle memory, taking over where my mind refused to engage. That's when I saw it. The first photo, a smiling group gathered under a wide white canopy strung with fairy lights. The table groaning under plates of catered food. My mother's favorite lilies arranged neatly in the background. I recognized the setup instantly. The anniversary party? The party I wasn't supposed to come to. Another swipe, another smiling face. My sister Lauren, radiant in a champagne-colored dress, holding up a gift. The gift. My gift. I froze, breath catching somewhere between my chest and my throat. There it was, unmistakable. The hand-painted clock, the delicate gold etching of our family name I'd spent weeks commissioning. And there she stood, presenting it like it was hers. The caption beneath the photo hit harder than I could have imagined. So thoughtful of Lauren to organize everything. We're so proud of her. No mention of me. No hint of the person who had chosen that clock, who had written every word of love and gratitude tucked inside the unopened card. I stared at the screen, willing it to change, to correct itself, to whisper that it was all some misunderstanding. But the pictures kept coming, and the captions twisted the knife deeper. Couldn't have asked for a better daughter. She made the day unforgettable. I set the phone down, but it vibrated again. A fresh notification pulling my gaze back. It wasn't just photos anymore. It was whispers. Threads running through the comments. Words spat out casually by people who only knew one side of the story. She didn't even bother to show up. So selfish. Some people can't stand it when others are more successful. Always thought she was a bit off. Each sentence felt like a slap, sharper than the last. And with every new comment, the narrative twisted tighter around me like a noose. It wasn't just that they had celebrated without me. It wasn't just that my gift had been stolen. It was that they were rewriting me, painting me as the jealous, bitter outsider, the black sheep who couldn't be bothered to show up, who must have been too ashamed to face her shining, perfect family. I pushed back from the table, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. My heart hammered against my ribs, not out of panic, but out of something colder, something harder taking root. I walked to the sink, running the water until it turned icy in my hands, letting the numbness crawl up my fingers. I needed something sharp, something real to hold on to, because everything else, the family, the love, the place I thought I held, was slipping through my grasp like smoke. 3 days ago, I had still believed I mattered to them, even in some small, quiet way. Now, they hadn't just locked the door behind me. They were painting over the doorway, pretending I'd never been there at all. The rest of the day passed in a haze. I moved from room to room, not doing much of anything. The house felt too large, too empty. Every creak in the floorboards a reminder of how easily silence could swallow a person whole. By late afternoon, the sky outside shifted to a softer blue, but it might as well have stayed gray for all I noticed. I sat back down at the table, phone still in hand, screen dark now. I traced the edge of the table with my fingertips, the wood smooth and worn beneath them. I thought of the party still buzzing on the other side of town, of my sister beaming in all the photos of my parents standing proudly at her side of the clock I had chosen, held in hands that didn't even know what it meant. I wondered if they had even opened the card, or if they had thrown it away without reading. Probably didn't even notice it was missing. The injustice of it all burned in my chest. Heavier than anger, sharper than sadness. It was betrayal dressed up in Sunday best, smiling for the camera, toasting to a lie. And somehow, they had all agreed to believe it. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't call anyone to demand explanations. I simply sat there, feeling the truth settle deep into my bones, like the first real cold of winter. I had lost them long before this party, long before the photos, long before the captions and the rumors. The only difference now was that they had made it official. I closed my eyes briefly, breathing in the stale air of a house that no longer felt like home. When I opened them again, it was with a clarity I hadn't known I needed. They had already rewritten my story without me. I placed my phone face down on the table, the screen dark against the grain of the wood. I stared at it for a long moment, feeling the hollow space inside me echo louder than the empty room. A part of me, a reckless, aching part, wanted to pick up my keys, drive across town, and walk straight into that party. I imagined the scene in vivid detail. The gasps, the frozen smiles, the shock of realizing I wasn't as invisible as they wanted me to be. But I didn't move. I stayed still, letting the weight of their erasure sink into my skin like cold rain. I wasn't going to crash their party. No, something colder, sharper was beginning to settle inside me. I would let them bask in their lies a little longer. Sometimes silence was louder than any confrontation. Somewhere across town, the laughter and clinking glasses carried on without me. The sun dipped lower, casting long, soft shadows across the neighborhood. I stood up slowly, stretching stiff limbs, and moved to the living room window. From there, I could see the rooftops of Portland's quiet suburbs, the faint glow of porch lights flickering to life one by one. They were celebrating, wrapped in their own false stories. But the truth had a way of slipping through cracks. At the party, Lauren posed for another set of photos near the dessert table, her smile polished and effortless. The rented hall shimmered under strings of delicate fairy lights, and the air buzzed with the hum of congratulations and shallow conversations. It was the kind of scene where everything looked perfect until you looked just a little closer. Near the bar, an older cousin, Marlene, sipped her wine and frowned slightly. Turning to my mother, she asked loud enough for those nearby to hear. "Where's Maya? Isn't she the one working at Green Tech Solutions?" A strange stillness fell over the group, the kind of stillness that makes your skin prickle. Glances were exchanged, smiles stiffened. Lauren let out a practiced little laugh, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear with calculated nonchalance. "Oh, she's doing her own thing," she said lightly. "Very independent, you know." There it was, dismissive, rehearsed thin enough to see straight through. Marlene didn't press further, but the seed of discomfort had already been planted. Conversation stumbled for a few beats before regaining their hollow rhythm, but the damage was done. The perfection of the night had been cracked, however faintly. Later that evening, after most of the guests had filtered out lingering in polite goodbyes and half-hearted hugs, Lauren pulled her boyfriend Brandon toward a smaller cluster of family gathered near the back. "This is Brandon," she said, voice a little too bright. "You know, we've been seeing each other for a few months now." Brandon, tall and clean-cut, offered a genuine smile and shook a few hands. He didn't have the polished facade the rest of them wore. He seemed almost real, unaware of the undercurrents swirling around him. As he accepted a glass of champagne from my father, he chuckled, raising it in a casual toast. "Crazy small world, huh? I just started at Green Tech Solutions recently. My boss is amazing. Tough, but fair." He paused, glancing around warmly, oblivious to the gathering tension. To Maya Chen, he said, lifting his glass higher. The room went utterly still. You could hear the faint buzz of the ceiling fan. You could hear the distant clink of a dish being stacked in the kitchen. And then the soft, sharp gasp of someone trying too late to hide their shock. A fork clattered to the floor with a sharp clink. Brandon, confused, lowered his glass a fraction. His smile faltered. He looked from one frozen face to another, the warmth draining from the air. My sister's hand tightened around his arm nails, pressing just a little too hard into his sleeve. My mother's expression stiffened the corners of her mouth, pulling into a smile so forced it looked painful. My father cleared his throat, but no words came out. They had spent the evening spinning a world where I didn't exist, where I was a footnote, an embarrassment, a mistake best forgotten. But reality had just crashed the party. Loud, clear, unavoidable. They could erase my face from their family portraits. They could crop my name out of conversations, twist my story to suit their needs. But they couldn't erase the truth of who I was. And no matter how hard they tried my name, my work, my worth was bigger than their shame. I wasn't just a ghost haunting their memories. I was standing right there, woven into the very fabric of their celebrations, whether they liked it or not. In the stunned silence that followed, Brandon shifted uncomfortably, sensing the crack he had unknowingly split wide open. And for the first time in a long while, I smiled. Not the sad, longing smile I used to wear when thinking of them. A different smile, colder, sharper. Because now I knew something they couldn't control anymore. They could erase me from pictures, but not from reality. The silence in the banquet hall stretched so long, it became physical, like an invisible weight pressing down on everyone. Faces froze in place, smiles twitching at the corners, eyes darting for rescue. The glint of silverware, the soft hum of the chandelier above, even the clink of champagne glasses, it all faded into a ringing kind of stillness. Lauren's flawless exterior cracked first. She stumbled over a laugh that sounded more like a cough, quickly grabbing Brandon's arm, as if she could reel his words back into his mouth. Dad, ever the patriarch, cleared his throat too loudly. The kind of sound you make when you're about to scold a child for speaking out of turn. But it was too late. Brandon, standing tall with the easy confidence of someone who didn't know he had just shattered the evening's biggest illusion, looked around confused. What he asked, lightly sensing the tension but missing the reason. The murmur started small, rippling from one cluster of guests to another. "Wait, Maya Chen from Green Tech Solutions," someone whispered near the dessert table. Another voice, this time from the group lingering by the punch bowl, chimed in. "Isn't that company huge now? Renewable energy, big contracts with the city, right?" Aunt Marlene, always sharp, narrowed her eyes slightly. "I thought she moved back here a while ago. Why has nobody mentioned her tonight?" Suddenly, the perfectly choreographed evening was unraveling like a cheap ribbon. Every forced laugh, every photo op, every sugar-coated toast cheapened by the truth that had been lurking under the surface all along. Lauren's attempt at recovery was pitiful. She tossed her hair back in a way that once used to win her applause at beauty pageants and forced a breezy laugh. "Oh, Maya's just, middle management. She's doing fine, but keeps to herself. Very busy." It was flimsy, transparent, the kind of lie that only works if nobody knows better. Brandon frowned, genuinely puzzled. Middle management? He repeated, looking down at Lauren as if she had spoken in another language. He laughed, not the cruel kind, but the innocent, bewildered kind, and said without a hint of malice. Actually, she's one of the co-founders. The company's pretty much her brainchild. Everyone knows Maya's the backbone of Green Tech Solutions. You could have heard a pin drop. No one reached for another mini quiche. No one sipped their watered-down cocktails. The truth, naked and undeniable, hung in the air, heavy as smoke. I sat back in my chair at home, miles away, but somehow closer than ever, staring into the quiet of my living room. And for the first time, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel erased. I felt free. The cracks in the perfect family facade were no longer hidden. They spiderwebbed across the evening like fault lines widening with every uncomfortable shuffle, every averted gaze. Someone tried to change the subject, a hurried, desperate comment about the weather, but the damage was irreversible. Uncle Rick, who'd once told me to stop chasing pipe dreams, looked like he wanted to disappear into his drink. Aunt Marlene stared openly at my mother, waiting for her to explain. But there was no explanation tidy enough. No lie neat enough. No Band-Aid wide enough to patch over the raw, bleeding truth. Brandon, poor soul, still didn't fully grasp the bomb he had dropped. He smiled awkwardly, sensing he'd said something wrong, but not sure what. I mean, he added, trying to soften the blow. She's just really respected. Even the executives listen when she talks. Kind of a big deal. Kind of a big deal. 3 little words, but they landed like a sledgehammer. I leaned back against the worn cushion of my sofa and closed my eyes, letting the vindication wash over me slow and steady. Let them squirm. Let them scramble for excuses. They had spent years pretending I was nothing but an afterthought, a disappointment best forgotten. But the truth had teeth. And tonight, it bit back. Out there in the same glossy hall, where they had toasted themselves for surviving 35 years of marriage, where they had smiled and lied and covered up every uncomfortable truth, my name now echoed louder than the string quartet playing in the background. Maya Chen, co-founder. Not some lost cause or black sheep. Not a mistake to be swept under the rug. Their party wasn't ruined by some outside scandal or misfortune. It was undone by their own arrogance, their fatal belief that they could reshape reality to fit their version of events. But reality didn't play by their rules. I opened my eyes and looked at the clock on the wall. Nearly midnight. The night they tried to erase me turned into the night they couldn't hide anymore. And somehow, without lifting a finger, I had won. After the party, after the revelation, after the shattering of their perfect image, I thought maybe foolishly that the dust would settle quietly, that they'd lick their wounds in private and leave me out of whatever theater they'd stage next. I should have known better. It was late, well past midnight, when I dragged myself home after a long day at the office. The streets were empty, the drizzle tapping on my windshield, a soft, persistent rhythm. The house greeted me with the kind of silence that doesn't comfort. It confronts. The kind that presses against your back the moment you close the door behind you. I kicked off my shoes, tossed my bag onto the couch, and went straight for the kitchen, flipping on a single dim light. The worn, familiar click of the switch filled the space louder than expected. I stood there for a minute, just breathing, letting the quiet settle into my bones. My phone buzzed against the counter, vibrating toward the edge like it had somewhere better to be. I sighed, reaching for it out of habit, and froze. 6 missed calls, 3 voicemails, a flood of text messages, all from numbers I knew by heart, but hadn't dialed in what felt like a lifetime. Mom, Dad, Lauren. A cold knot formed in my stomach. Part of me wanted to chuck the phone into the sink, run the garbage disposal. and forget all about it. But I didn't. Instead, I poured myself a glass of water, sat down at the kitchen island, and after a long moment, unlocked the screen. The first message blinked open. Mom, Maya, honey, we're sorry for how things looked the other night. It wasn't what it seemed. A second later, Dad. Everyone got carried away. Don't hold it against us. Family sticks together. Then Lauren, of all people, please don't be mad. It's just there were a lot of expectations, you know? I scrolled further. More apologies dressed up in soft words like misunderstanding and confusion. Words that sounded gentle if you didn't press too hard. But there was something slick underneath them. Something too polished. A pit opened wider in my chest as I kept reading. Buried halfway down the chain, tucked between a string of love and misuse, there it was. Mom, since you and Brandon work together now, maybe you could mentor him. You've always been so good at guiding people. It would mean a lot to us. There it was. The real reason. The apology wasn't about mending a broken bridge. It wasn't about recognizing the years they spent slicing me out of birthdays, holidays, family photos, like some inconvenient stain. It wasn't about realizing how deeply they had hurt me. It was about Brandon. About using me again to make their version of success look shinier. They didn't miss me. They missed the convenience of me, the utility of me, the tool I could be, if only I would play along. I placed the phone face down on the table, staring at the glass of water as if it held answers. A hollow laugh escaped my lips before I could stop it. Sharp, humorless. I tipped my head back, staring at the cracks in the ceiling paint. Funny. Even the house wore its flaws more honestly than they did. The urge to respond, to lash out, burned hot and fast. But it fizzled just as quickly. They weren't worth my anger anymore. They weren't worth explanations or second chances. They hadn't apologized because they missed me. They had apologized because they needed me. That realization didn't shatter me. It didn't even surprise me. It just emptied something out that I hadn't realized was still clinging on. I stood up, slowly poured the untouched water down the sink, and wiped my hands dry on a dish towel. Tomorrow, I'd go to work. I'd sit in meetings, lead discussions, make decisions that moved millions. I'd smile at Brandon across the conference table, knowing he didn't yet realize the politics his relationship with Lauren would drag him into. And I wouldn't say a word. Because sometimes silence is the loudest thing you can offer. I picked up my phone not to text back, but to block 3 numbers in a row. A small, clean click for each one. Click, click, click. There was a brutal poetry to it. I set the phone down once more this time, with no intention of picking it up again tonight. The knot in my chest loosened slightly. Maybe the story they told about me would still twist and turn in their circles. Maybe they'd still paint me selfish, distant, cold. Let them. I knew the truth. And this time, I wasn't giving it back. After I blocked their numbers that night, I slept deeper than I had in months. No dreams, no second guessing, just the kind of silence that feels earned. But peace never lasts long when old wounds still bleed beneath the surface. 2 days later, as the rain softened Portland's edges into a muted watercolor, a knock came at my door. Not an urgent pounding, just 2 polite taps, barely loud enough to register. I hesitated, half hoping it was a delivery I had forgotten about. It wasn't. A small, cream-colored envelope had been slipped under the doorframe. No return address, just my name in familiar, rushed handwriting. Mom's. I stared at it for a full minute before I picked it up. Inside was a short note. We know texting wasn't enough. Can we meet face to face? Just a talk. Love, Mom. Love. That word used to mean something. Now it felt like a tool, like a net cast out to drag me back into their orbit. Still, I agreed. Not because I wanted reconciliation. Not because I believed anything would be different. I agreed because sometimes you need to look the wound straight in the eye to know you're done stitching yourself back to the same broken thing. We met at a little cafe downtown Neutral Ground. I chose it on purpose. No memories clinging to the walls. No emotional fingerprints left behind. The place smelled of fresh espresso and pastries. Mid-afternoon light slanted through wide windows, casting a faint glow on the worn wooden floors. I spotted them immediately. Mom, Dad, and Lauren crammed awkwardly into a booth made for two trying too hard to look casual. I walked over slowly, every step deliberate. They rose halfway, uncertain whether to hug me, shake my hand, or just sit there pretending we were all normal. I chose for them by slipping into the seat across from theirs without a word. Small talk dribbled out first: the weather, how grown-up Brandon seemed at the party, how stressful these times were. I listened, nodding occasionally, my coffee cooling untouched in front of me. Finally, Mom leaned in, her voice low and syrupy. "Sweetheart, we just want to move past all the misunderstandings." Dad chimed in. "Family's too important to let little things get in the way." Lauren added brightly. "You know how people gossip, they twist things." I let them talk. Let them pile excuse upon excuse, like a child building a crooked tower out of rotting wood. Then quietly, I cut through it all. "If you're truly sorry," I said, voice even steady, "you'll say it publicly, in front of everyone who heard the lies." It wasn't a threat. It wasn't even anger. It was a simple request for basic human decency. The table stiffened as if I'd slapped them. Mom blinked rapidly, a tight smile cracking her face. Dad cleared his throat, glancing at his watch, like suddenly the afternoon had gotten very full. Lauren shifted uncomfortably, twisting the strap of her designer purse between her fingers. "Maya, honey." Mom began, tone slipping into condescension. "There's no need to make a scene. What's done is done." Dad leaned in, voice low. "Dragging things back up only creates more division." Lauren gave a practiced shrug. "Besides, people move on so quickly. No one even remembers." I stared at them, the people who had rewritten my place in the family, who had watched me disappear from photos, from memories, from their narrative, without a flicker of guilt, and realized something I should have accepted long ago. They weren't sorry they hurt me. They were sorry they couldn't control me anymore. Their idea of moving on meant shoving the truth under the rug and pretending it never happened. Their version of healing required my silence. They didn't want reconciliation. They wanted compliance. I set my coffee cup down with a quiet, deliberate clink. Then I stood up. For a moment, the world narrowed to the feel of my own heartbeat steady in my chest. No shaking, no second-guessing, just certainty. "I'm done crossing lines to stay in rooms that never wanted me," I said, voice calm, but carrying across the cafe. A few heads turned. I didn't care. Their faces twisted shock, embarrassment, anger, flickering in quick succession. But I didn't wait for replies. I turned and walked out into the crisp afternoon air, each step lighter than the one before. They could keep their hollow apologies. They could keep their demands disguised as olive branches. They could keep their rewritten story where I was always the villain and they were always blameless. I had my own story now, and this time they didn't get to write it. The door of the cafe closed behind me with a soft click, sealing off the room I had just left behind and everything it stood for. I didn't rush. I didn't even look back. By the time I reached my car, twilight had folded itself over Portland like a heavy, familiar quilt, the kind you don't really want, but wrap around yourself anyway, out of habit. Tonight, though, I chose differently. I drove straight to my office. The building stood silent against the darkening sky, the security lights throwing long, lonely shadows across the lot. Most people had gone home hours ago, but I needed this moment. A lone, deliberate final. Inside, I switched on the small desk lamp. The light caught the sheen of carefully stacked papers, invoices, receipts, account ledgers, neat reminders of all the ways I had tied myself to people who never once thought to thank me. My fingers moved automatically, pulling up my laptop, logging into banking apps, opening folders that held too many years of silent sacrifices. First, the automatic transfers. The mortgage payments for my parents' second home canceled. The private insurance top-ups that kept Dad's golf injuries off their deductible revoked. The quiet monthly deposits into Lauren's emergency fund she always forgot to acknowledge terminated. One by one, I cut the cords. No announcements, no accusations, just done. It wasn't anger fueling me. It wasn't revenge. It was a simple acknowledgement I deserved better than a family that loved my usefulness more than they loved me. By the time I closed my laptop, the clock on the wall ticked toward midnight. Outside, the rain had returned, tapping softly against the window, like an old song I didn't need to hear anymore. I leaned back in my chair, letting the silence settle. It wasn't the desperate kind of silence, the one that used to follow every family gathering where my name was conveniently forgotten. No, this was something cleaner, sharper. A silence that said, enough. I gathered my things slowly and headed home, a deep, unfamiliar calm humming under my skin. But peace, as always, had a short shelf life when you're dealing with people who believe they own your story. The first shots came barely 3 days later. A coworker forwarded me a post from an old family friend, a sly, passive-aggressive update about children who forget who helped them when they had nothing. Another text from a distant cousin. Heard you left your parents high and dry after everything they did for you? Harsh. Even my old high school math teacher, Mrs. Partridge, posted a thinly veiled jab about entitled kids these days, thinking success erases gratitude. It was almost impressive, really, how fast they spun the new version. How fast they weaponized my silence into a weapon against me. At first, it stung. That familiar tightening in the chest. That heat behind the eyes. But it didn't last. One evening, after a long day full of meetings, I sat on my balcony, phone in hand, reading yet another bitter comment tucked under a Facebook photo of my cousin's birthday party. My name floated there, sour and swollen, wrapped in lies. My thumb hovered over the screen. Then I set the phone down, not with fury, not with tears, just peace. They could say what they wanted. They could rewrite every line of every story they needed to tell themselves to sleep at night. I wasn't living for their approval anymore. I wasn't living inside their version of me. I smiled to myself. Not the bitter, broken smile I used to wear after every family slight, but something steadier, real. Let them lie. Let them twist. Let them scream into whatever echo chamber would have them. Meanwhile, I would be living a life too full, too honest, too vibrant for their noise to ever touch. The truth didn't need defending. It just needed living. The early morning light barely peeked through the blinds when I stood at my window, coffee cooling untouched in my hand. A new day, a new choice. I had thought cutting the financial cords would be the last tie severed. But sometimes the ones who can't stand losing control don't just let go. They lash out. I was deep in prep mode for the annual Green Tech Solutions Leadership Conference. The company was gearing up for our largest event yet. My days blurred into meetings, planning sessions, keynote drafts. It should have been exhilarating. It should have felt like stepping into a new chapter. But then 2 weeks after the cafe meeting, an anonymous email slid into my inbox like a snake under a door. Subject line: you should see this. No greeting, no explanation, just screenshots. At first, I thought it was spam, until my eyes caught certain phrases. Phrases too familiar to dismiss. False accusations, fabricated emails suggesting I had abused my authority for personal vendettas against certain employees, claims that I had unfairly promoted friends, though anyone with half a brain would know GreenTech Solutions' HR reviews were notoriously brutal. Still, damage didn't need facts. It needed whispers. And the language, the way the sentences twisted my loyalty into arrogance, the bitter little jabs cloaked in concern. It stank of my father's cold, rehearsed condescension and Lauren's faux sweet deflections. I sat back in my chair, breathing slow, steady. Not surprised, just tired, but not defeated. They thought they could reach into my world, the one I had bled and built for myself, and poison it from the inside. They were wrong. I spent the next 2 evenings gathering everything. Not in anger, in precision. Bank statements, payment histories for the mortgage I had floated for years, insurance coverage records, screenshots of text messages where Lauren had begged for loans she later pretended never happened. Every trail they had conveniently ignored while living off my silence. I organized it into neat digital folders, date-stamped, cross-referenced, annotated. Then I requested a quiet meeting with corporate legal. No grand speeches, no messy confrontations, just facts. Undeniable, unbendable, unavoidable facts. The leadership conference came fast anyway. Hundreds of people packed the soaring conference hall, shareholders, partners, journalists, and me standing backstage, heart steady as a war drum. I wasn't slated to speak that morning. Good. I had already said everything that needed saying without opening my mouth. Halfway through the opening address, I saw them. Members of the board murmuring over printed packets, legal advisors pulling individuals aside. Whispers this time didn't hurt. They clarified. When the dust settled 3 hours later, it wasn't my reputation crumbling. It was theirs. The board issued a formal statement reaffirming my role in leadership. No names were mentioned, but the subtext screamed, "We know we see, and we do not condone." The smear campaign, exposed as family-driven sabotage, buried itself faster than it had risen. I didn't need to gloat. Didn't need a mic drop moment. Walking out of the building later that night under the brittle glare of city lights, I felt something different crack open inside me. Not anger, not grief, freedom. Not because they had apologized. They hadn't. Not because they had admitted guilt. They wouldn't. Freedom, because I finally understood. Truth didn't need my defense. It carried its own weight. And tonight, it spoke louder than any apology ever could. By the time the cool breeze rolled over the lake, the day had begun to slip into a soft, golden haze. I sat on a worn wooden bench, hands resting loosely on my lap, watching sunlight scatter across the water like broken pieces of glass. A quiet place fitting for a kind of funeral no one else would attend. My phone buzzed again, rattling lightly against the bench beside me. Another text, another voicemail, another. "We miss you," dressed up in the kind of sugary concern only those who never protected you could muster. I didn't rush to answer. I didn't even reach for it. Instead, I tilted my head back, closed my eyes for a moment, and listened to the soft rustle of leaves above me. The world kept moving, indifferent and forgiving, in a way that people rarely were. It had been nearly a month since everything came to light at GreenTech Solutions. Since then, the calls had started. Tentative at first, then urgent, then almost desperate. We were wrong. Let's rebuild. Family is family. Familiar slogans, same promises I had once swallowed whole. But sitting there feeling the earth firm beneath my feet and the sun against my face, they felt like echoes from another lifetime. A life I no longer belonged to. I reached into my purse and pulled out the old birthday card, the same one I had written years ago, crammed with words of hope that maybe, just maybe one day, I would be seen loved without conditions. Its edges were worn now, corners bent from too many times, being handled, tucked away, reopened, and reread. I unfolded it slowly, smoothing it across my knee. The handwriting looked younger. so did the dreams it carried. Dear Mom and Dad, I love you. I hope you know that no matter what happens, I'll always be proud to be your daughter. I smiled sadly. There was a time I would have given anything to hear those words reflected back to me. Now, I didn't need to. The hurt was real. It would always be a part of me stitched into the fabric of my life. But it didn't define me anymore. It didn't trap me. I refolded the card carefully, tenderly, as if tucking away a part of myself I no longer needed to carry, and placed it beside me on the bench. The sun dipped lower. Shadows stretched across the park, and the soft chatter of families and children carried across the breeze. I rose, leaving the card where it lay. As I walked, the wind caught it, lifting it gently off the bench and sending it tumbling across the grass. First a flutter, then a graceful fall. I didn't look back. Not when the card disappeared into the brush. Not when my phone buzzed again and again in my pocket. I walked forward, each step a quiet severing, a quiet promise. I would not build bridges from my blood anymore. I would not apologize for the space I needed to heal. No more waiting. No more hoping for changed hearts from those who had broken mine with clear eyes. They didn't miss me. They missed the version of me that had once given without limits. The version that forgave too easily. The version that stayed silent to keep their world comfortable. And that version of me, she was gone. What remained now was someone they didn't recognize and couldn't control. Someone willing to walk away, not with rage, not with a need to prove anything, but with dignity so quiet it was deafening. I reached the edge of the lake path where the asphalt met the road and paused. The horizon was open ahead, untouched wide. I smiled, a real one this time. Healing didn't come with fireworks. It came in small moments, like breathing deeper, walking lighter, choosing yourself when no one else thought you should. As I crossed the street, the last light of day caught the corner of my eye. The faded birthday card fluttering one last time before settling quietly into the earth. The goodbye they never expected. The goodbye I had owed myself all along. Sometimes the hardest goodbyes are the ones we say without a single word. Choosing yourself isn't selfish. It's survival when family forgets what love really means. Have you ever had to walk away to find your peace? I'd love to hear your story in the comments. If you connect with real, raw family stories like this one, make sure to subscribe for more powerful family drama journeys. Thank you for being here.